This is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
This could be our final chance to talk actual NBA and NHL games for a very long time, because a couple of elimination games coming up on Monday and Tuesday. First, the Heat trying to stave off elimination against the Nuggets, and then the Panthers trying to do the same against the Vegas Golden Knights. We're going to break down both those game fives today with Austin Swaim getting his read on those series and letting us know whether we can expect more basketball and hockey to come. This is Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire, joined here as mentioned by Austin Swaim. Check him out on Twitter at aswaim3. Find his work over at numberFire.com. And Austin, kind of don't want to say goodbye to the NHL and NBA as of yet. So how we doing? How we feeling? Are you okay with how this is going, or where are we at mentally right now?
You and I discussed when I first came on here that I was going to be rooting for the Heat kind of in the shadows because I'm in Denver here. So they're my East team. So I was quietly, It's gone just about as expected on that front. I'm a little surprised that the hockey series has been so lopsided thus far, but stranger things have definitely happened. We've seen 3-1 leads blown a lot in recent years. So let's see if either of these teams can make a little bit of history themselves.
Hypothetically, not that we're rooting for this, hypothetically, if Denver does clinch tonight, are you going out in the streets, going to go get your party on with the good people of Denver?
Absolutely not. I know that it will be crazy, though. I know that I will probably hear things outside. I've seen Nuggets jerseys flooded around town that I haven't seen quite literally ever, and that makes sense with them in the finals for the first time, and they played phenomenal. So congrats to everybody in my hometown that's listening, even though they think I'm a hater.
I want you to be out there enjoying it, because they don't know you're a Heat fan, like you for the Heat. They don't know that.
Party. Yeah.
They don't know your tweets. Just hang out, have some fun, go hang out, have a good time.
For sure.
When I lived in Boston, never was going to root for the Red Sox, but they are the Patriots, and they won a Super Bowl while we were there. I didn't quite get to the parade, and I do regret that. So I'd consider it, at least give it some consideration if things do break against the Heat. For sure. We're going to talk about that game first. Then we'll talk about Panthers versus Golden Knights, all coming up here in just 1 second. But first, as a reminder, make sure you're subscribed to the Covering the Spread podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. We're here every weekday breaking down all sorts of different sports, and there is plenty to come across the summer, even when NBA and NHL wrapped up tomorrow. U.S. Open preview via Brandon Gadula. We'll talk about that tomorrow right here on the show. To get that and all of our shows as they go live, make sure you're subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts, and also check us out over on the FanDuel YouTube page. If you like what you hear, leave us a thumbs up on YouTube or a 5-star rating over on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It is almost time to crown an NBA champion, and FanDuel wants you to be part of the excitement, because right now, new customers can get a no-sweat first bet up to $2,500. That is $2,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. There's no better place to bet all the finals action than America's #1 sportsbook, FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. First online real money wager only. $10 deposit required. Refund issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 14 days. Restrictions apply. See full terms at FanDuel.com/sportsbook. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino LLC. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit FanDuel.com/RG. In Arizona, 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342. In Connecticut, 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat. In Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT. In Wyoming and Kansas, 1-800-522-4700 or in Kansas, KSGamblingHelp.com. Louisiana is 1-877-770-STOP. In Massachusetts, GamblingHelplineMA.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support. In Maryland, mdgamblinghelp.org. In New York, 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. And in West Virginia, go to 1-800-GAMBLER.net. Let's kick things off here with the Heat at the Nuggets. We've seen some tightening of this spread overnight. It was Nuggets -9. It is now down to 8.5 at FanDuel Sportsbook. Total here is 209.5. And Austin, the Nuggets have a chance to clinch tonight. And I want to know from you. We've seen this spread tighten to 8.5. So I'm not going to ask you about the Heat money line because, we could potentially get into that. But have you seen enough in the Nuggets to consider laying the points here on a large spread? Or do you see this game as being a bit tighter than that?
I think you have to, because a lot of the sharp handicaps of this series have been exactly correct about what we can expect from Miami. By the way, it would be the heatiest 2023 Miami Heat thing in the world to win this game when everybody's counting them out. This is a buzzsaw heading into Denver in Game 5 with their first franchise title on the line, and they've just defied the odds the entire time. But what I think we're seeing in real time is we are seeing the regression, the drop-off of why everyone kind of counted Miami out, is that they are just having trouble getting high-quality shots against a more athletic team with better players that proved it in the regular season. Miami in the series has a 46.2 effective field goal rate. That is really poor shooting can happen. There have been shooting slumps that have plagued other teams in these playoffs, but the problem is in these last two games in Miami, they've actually shot 52.9% from 3-point range downtown. So they're actually shooting well on open shots. They're just not getting a lot of them. They're actually outpacing Denver a little bit. There aren't a ton of open shots to be had on either side, but the problem is that they have so few shot makers compared to Denver. You think about Jamal Murray. I guess Bruce Brown is hitting step back threes now. It's really just a difference. And what I've talked about the entire postseason run, why I like the Celtics last series, why I like the Knicks before that series, is like Gabe Vincent, Caleb Martin, they had a 75 effective field goal rate for like 20 games to get here. You'd be lucky to see that in 5 games from those players, given their samples in the regular season. And it's just an unbelievable run that defied the odds to get to this point. But I think they've dropped off quite a bit, haven't really made Jokic have any problems in any of the 4 games thus far. So I think you have to absolutely consider laying the points in this spot.
Would you? Do you think 8.5 is a fair number, or is it more so just a consideration for you?
My lean right now that I'm writing up in my betting guide over on numberFire today is to lay the spread on Denver's points here, just because of what you've seen, the mismatch on the offensive glass, the massive gap in shooting. It doesn't really seem poised to turn around when a lot of the open shots have now gone in for the Heat. Games 2 through 4, they just aren't getting very many. Denver's defense has been significantly improved, and maybe a lack of focus changes that in Game 5 because you are up 3-1. We're talking about celebrating in Denver tonight,
right?
But I really do like what I'm seeing from the Nuggets in this spot.
So the total here is 209.5. That has gone up a point from where it was last night. Any thoughts for you on the total in this game?
So right now, based on the pace we've seen from these two teams thus far, the pace has been incredibly slow, and that's why the under is actually cashed in 3 of the 4 games. The only exception was that historic Miami fourth quarter in Game 2 to actually win it, right? Pacing has been well on pace even for an under here. I've got Denver currently projected for 107.2 points, Miami 98.2, so that's kind of right on this 9-point spread, but that's only 205.4 total points. And this number has been dropping the whole time. The public side that's been getting a lot of the action has been the overs. You'd expect people like to root for points instead of root for misses. That's just kind of organic and baked into these big games. So I'm not quite jumping off the table to bet this number, but I do show value on it. Miami shooting isn't a super huge concern. If they were missing a bunch of open threes and it was this tight, I'd be very concerned. But the shot quality just hasn't been very good. I imagine the pace, we might get our slowest pace as the stakes heighten here in Game 5. So I do like the under in this game too.
Okay, that number is 209.5 right now. The under is -110 at FanDuel Sportsbook. Any player props stand out to you, Austin, across this game, or not as much there?
So I am going to go to the guy that everyone knows tonight's game is hinging on. That is Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, over 7.5 points. I love to kind of dabble in these lower player prop markets. That's where I think the value can reside. Definitely what I was looking for to see from KCP if I was going to bet his over in this game was his minutes returning in Game 4. They did. He was kind of a victim of that huge Christian Brown game in Game 3, where he kind of got benched late, but he back up to 36 minutes in Game 4. And most role players tend to shoot more shots at home, and they tend to shoot better at home, and it's no different for KCP. He's got a 13.2% usage rate at home compared to 11.5% away from home. And actually, I think he's due to hit a few shots in this series. 57.2 effective field goal rate in the playoffs. That's right in line with his regular season mark. It's only 42.9% in this series. So he's been missing quite a bit. Game 1 did a lot of that damage for him. Denver can just hit you in so many different ways that they've been so dominant with one of their starters, one of their snipers, not really doing anything. I think we could see the KCP game tonight. There's a reason they'll probably be the NBA champions when this is all said and done.
Yeah, Contavious Caldwell-Pope, his number right now, 7.5 points over his -108. It sounds like based on the way you discussed all these, you like the KCP player prop more than you like either the under or the Nuggets -8.5. Is that correct?
Yes, I absolutely do. I think I have this weird, strange feeling that this might hit in the first quarter, just because when you get a guy that shoots from outside, we saw it with Max Strus in game 2, he could hit 3-3-pointers in the first quarter and cash it. But that's me boldly calling my shot. I don't know if you could dig into Sportsbook and find a spot where you get 3 first quarter threes for whatever you might find. But there's first quarter points. So
we'll field goal attempt. Yeah, we got first quarter points here. Let's just look at a
There's
curiosity.
no KCP market because they're afraid.
Wow. They're shook. They knew the sharp money from Austin Swaim was coming in on KCP, and they didn't want the smoke. I get it. I respect it, but I'm mad. All right. So the bets Austin likes for game 5 here between the Nuggets and the Heat. Nuggets -8.5, the under 209.5 at -110, and KCP over 7.5 points -108. Potentially, maybe doing so pretty early in this game. Maybe you want to check out a KCP first bucket, 3-pointer, something like that.
Yeah.
This is not an endorsement, just saying, if you want to have some fun out there as well. Let's talk now about the NHL. Game 5 here between the Panthers and the Vegas Golden Knights. This one also a potential elimination game with the Knights on the verge of a Stanley Cup. And we've seen a lot of movement in the Golden Knights' favor here because their money line was -160 last night. It is now out to -178. So some money coming in here on the Vegas money line. The total of this game, 5.5, -130 on the over. And Austin, it kind of seems like this series has been closer than the Nuggets and Heat series has, but, it's still 3-1. Panthers were able to avoid a sweep thanks to their winning game 3, but it's a tough spot still. So what's your handicap of game 5, given what we've seen so far?
So, yeah, absolutely. And the thing to keep in mind when betting these two against each other, statistically, as far as winning against an equal team on your home floor, the NBA's home court advantage is the largest of all 4 pro sports. NHL's is the lowest. So the Panthers aren't going into quite the buzzsaw the Miami Heat are from the same town there in South Florida. But it actually has been a lot tighter. 65.4% of the goals are in Vegas's favor on the box score. It's actually just 52.8% of expected goals. So, Jim, your sentiment is correct that it feels like it's been a lot closer. And we talked about goaltending when myself and both Tom Vecchio previewed this series. We liked the under series goals. Unfortunately, the carriage has turned back into a pumpkin for my guy, Sergei Bobrovsky. He's had -2.38 goals saved above expectation in this series. And look, he was hot and then they got like 10 days off. So I kind of get that. I thought he was going to find his rhythm in game 3. Did not end up working into game 4. But Aiden Hill on the other side, plus 2.838 goals saved above expectation for Vegas. A little weird those numbers match. But definitely Aiden Hill's outplayed him to this point. I think that's a large reason of why Vegas is ahead the way they are. But with that the case, the path to projecting Florida to win this game is pretty simple. Vegas's spread is clearly getting crushed. The money line's getting crushed by bettors alike, given the movement we've seen on this. I'm showing value with Florida's money line when projecting roughly neutral goaltending because I don't just go off what we saw in the series. I take the larger playoff series sample as large, and Bobrovsky was far and away the best goaltender in the playoffs thus far, and I don't want to write him off from coming back to that form. So I've got Florida closer to -105 in this spot, so the juice that you get with Florida's money line is really attractive. I'm also expecting 4.61 expected goals, so with neutral goaltending, that would look like an under as well.
Okay, so the Panthers money line is +146. Austin is on that. Under 5.5 is +106. Preference for you between those two bets, Austin?
I like Florida's money line, man. The thing that's giving me trepidation is that we've seen this stark movement in the way, and you do not want to fade that overly often, as I'm sure you talked about at length on this podcast. But I really like I really like Florida's chances to rebound just because of the form Bobrovsky has held. I'd be very surprised. We talked a little bit about the shooting with the Heat. I'd be very surprised if Bobrovsky is so far away from his playoff norm as we get deeper into this series. And I definitely like the Panthers of these two teams to go into Game 5 and get a win on the road.
Yeah, it's never fun to bet against the market because the market
No.
tends to be very efficient. But it is worth noting that there is a big gap between plus 130 and plus 146. So the implied odds of plus 130, 43.5%. The implied odds of plus 146 are 40.7%. So down like 2.5 percentage points, and that can make a massive difference. So the market could be correct in saying the Panthers were overvalued when it was plus 130.
Yep.
But then it could also be wrong in saying that they were undervalued or overvalued at plus 146, because that is a swing. So I think that what I would view from this market is I'd want to check it out and monitor it. And if it stays stagnant at plus 146 for a bit longer, that indicates to me it's moved out of a point where people are going to be betting on Vegas. They've reached the point of the tipping point where they're no longer seeing value there, and maybe we'll see some buyback on the Panthers.
Sure.
So if it stays plus 146 for a while, then I'd be okay with betting against the market, because that's the market telling me, okay, we've gotten what we need here. We've bled Vegas dry in terms of the money line there, and there's no longer value. So I would say, try to just read the market. And if it stays stagnant, then it's the market telling you, we've sucked this one dry. Feel free to buy back if you want.
Yeah. And I'd also add, I was on, as we talked about on the show, I was on Florida before the series. Based on the way that I was calculating this, I was on Florida in Game 1, Game 3, and then Game 4 again. So like, I've only gotten one of those games right. The series isn't trending in the correct direction. Sometimes you have to stop digging your own hole, and and there just might be something different at play. Whether Bobrovsky is settled back into his regular season norm, Aiden Hill is well above his still at this point. And those are the types of factors that if you try to do this with an analytical model and you're wrong, don't keep digging, would be my advice in those situations.
Unless there are indications that regression could be in store. And
Sure,
with the Panthers, maybe there are, with the way the series has been pretty tight. So I think it's always a balance for sure. What about player props? Anything you like in that regard for Game 5?
So I saw a number yesterday that caught my eye because it was such a wide price. And then I realized why it's not popular and why it might be trending the other way. I like Jack Eichel over 3.5 shots on goal here. Premier player for Vegas. His shot volume has slowed down a bit in the Stanley Cup Finals, and I think actually a lot of it has to do with the lopsided results we've seen thus far. He's played less than 15 minutes or around that mark in 3 of the 4 games. But it's just because he hasn't been needed. He's one of their better players, top 6 forward. They're just resting him up because the game's already been decided. He is averaging 0.17 shots per minute in the playoffs thus far. So about 22 minutes on average in this series in the competitive games, producing 3.57 in that estimated time. So I'm actually projecting this around even money that he'd hit the number of 3.5, and it's sitting here at plus 142. And one of my favorite things is when I see a pace like that, and then I see somebody, because a common prop methodology is he's hit this in 6 of his last 7 games, or he's hit this in his last 5 games. Eichel hasn't hit this in 6 straight, yet the line sits here still at 3.5. So I really like that when I see his pace. When I forecast Florida to be more competitive in this game, a Florida win would actually correlate very well to this Eichel number, because the game is more likely competitive than if we see another Vegas route. So I do like Eichel over 3.5 shots on goal in this one.
And they're not uncorrelated in the sense that if it's a shot and goal, that doesn't imply that it's necessarily a goal. You do worry that if Eichel's getting more shots, that implies there's more possession in favor of Vegas. That's the one way in which they may not mesh as well. But again, plus 142 is definitely not a bad number. Yep. So Eichel over 3.5 shots, plus 142. Austin also does like the Panthers money line at plus 146, and the under 5.5 at plus 106, all available right now over at FanDuel Sportsbook. Again, Austin, hopefully this is not our final time talking NBA and NHL for this season, but if it is, it has been a delight having you on as always. Enjoy Game 5. I hope you, maybe let's say Game 7, I want you to go out there, whether it be celebrating happiness or celebrating a Heat win. I want you out in the streets after Game 7, because I want 3 more games. I'm trying to manifest this, that you get out there. But either way, appreciate the time as always, and have fun tonight.
Yeah, you too, Jim. Thank you. We will see what we've got in store. I will say I'm not counting out this Heat team. I've made that mistake too much.
Plenty of people have, and it's hasn't worked out yet. So we'll see if they can claw their back once again. Again, thank you, Austin. We'll talk to you later. That is Austin Swaim. Check him out on Twitter at ASwaim3. Find his work over at numberFire.com. We'll still get Austin on the show, talk some UFC throughout the summer as well, because we can't fully let him off the hook as of yet, even with NBA and NHL potentially wrapping up for the year. Before we close up shop for today here on the show, do got to go back to last week and recap the recommendations, the weekly recommendations from here on the show. Let's start things off with the Belmont Stakes. We had Christina Blacker of FanDuel TV. You can find her on Twitter at ChristinaFDTV on to preview the Belmont Stakes. And Christina came close to getting her second consecutive win. She liked Tapit Trice to win the Belmont at 3-1. And Tapit Trice finished third. Arcangelo got the win. Forte finished third there. So couldn't quite get that one, but it was close. Also a close one for Christina in race 8 at Belmont on Saturday. She liked Drew's Gold 8-1. Drew's Gold finished second. So came close at a long number. Couldn't quite get there. Fun call by Christina there. And then in race 11, like Ottoman Fleet to win, they finished third. So a lot of close calls for Christina. A lot of podiums. We're talking F1 and NASCAR, but good calls by Christina. And fun to have Christina on the show here throughout the Triple Crown season. Again, make sure you check her out on Twitter at ChristinaFDTV. Check out all the good work over at FanDuel TV, as they have a lot of good horse racing coverage still to come across the rest of this summer. Our guest on the golf side of things to preview the RBC Canadian Open was Brandon Gandula. Check him out on Twitter at Gandula13. Nick Taylor got the win. 72-foot putt in a playoff to win it. Awesome to see a Canadian win that event. Brandon and I were tilting Nick Taylor because we had both used him in DFS and are head-to-head against each other. And it looked like he was going to miss the cut on Thursday and then rallied back to actually win the whole freaking thing. And a fun scene there with Adam Hadwin getting destroyed by security. Really fun day in golf on Sunday. Brandon's outrights for the Canadian Open were Tyrrell Hatton at 11-1, Sahith Theegala at 30-1. Hatton came close. He was one of like 16 guys in the hunt all day Saturday, Sunday. He finished one stroke back in third. Really good Sunday to finish off for Hatton. Did make it close. Couldn't quite get there. Theegala finished 38th. Non-outrights were Alex Smalley and Ben Griffin top 10. Smalley was plus 250. Griffin plus 290. Griffin missed the cut. Smalley did give it a run on Sunday. He finished with a 67, but he finished one stroke out of the top 20. So tough beat there, but we got the U.S. Open, which we'll break down tomorrow here on the show and try to rally back there. Austin Cass was our guest on to preview the UCL final between Man City and Inter Milan. And of course, Man City won 1-0. Austin, you can find him on Twitter at Austin Cass. He liked a couple different bets where he thought that Inter would keep this game close, but maybe have a draw after 90 minutes plus stoppage time, or potentially a close win for Man City. Did get the close win for Man City. He liked a tie at 1-1 at 8-1, again, after 90 minutes plus stoppage time, and Man City to win 2-1 plus 700. And Inter did give it a run late. They were almost able to tie things up, couldn't quite get one across. So no win there, but a really competitive game. Inter, I think, did win the expected goals differential in that game. Doesn't really matter as far as banners go, but does mean that Austin probably had a good read on that match regardless. The two prop bets were there, were Lautaro Martinez to score or assist at plus 240, and then Nicola Barea to score or assist at plus 430. Inter didn't score, so no hit on either of those, but I think the overall read on the way the match broke down was good by Austin there. Again, check him out on Twitter at Austin Cass. For NASCAR, I felt simultaneously close, but also so far to hitting a big one on Sunday. I had Michael McDowell to win 40-1 at Sonoma, and he was fast in practice. He qualified third. So McDowell went from 40-1 to 14-1. Really good movement there. And he was good in the race, but lost a few spots on the start of the race. Started third. He was 7th or so right away. Did claw his way back up and was running third before a late caution. But then they made a pit stop, and his pit crew made a mistake. They dropped the lug nut, and he went from third going in to 13th coming out. He did rally to finish 7th, so I had recommended the top 10 bet at plus 155. That one did cash, but I thought he might have a shot for a win. Martin Truex Jr. definitely had the better car. Like, even when you're comparing them, their lap times when they're both in equal in clean air, Truex was still about like 0.3 faster. So it wasn't close in that regard, but like from a positional perspective, I thought he had a shot. So, the hope would have been if McDowell didn't have that bad pit stop, he'd be up there for a late race restart, maybe can get a leg up on Truex, get some distance. So did hit the McDowell top 10, but not quite there on the 40-1 outright, despite the good closing line value. Other top 10s were Austin Dillon, 650 or plus 650, Zane Smith plus 800, Dylan Jordan to plus 400 before the weekend and qualified 11th. So FanDuel did not reopen top 10 odds after qualifying, but if they had, he probably would have been pretty good from plus 650, but he spun during the race. He got loose and Ty Gibbs hit him. It was not Ty Gibbs' fault. It was Dylan's fault, but we did see Dylan claw back into the teens, but couldn't quite get the top 10, so no cash there. And Smith, not really competitive at all. Most of the forwards were not, other than Chris Buescher and Michael McDowell, so couldn't quite get that one. Other outright was on Daniel Suarez. He had an issue basically the first lap, so couldn't win the 16-1 there and didn't really get super close on that one. So annoying to get good movement on a 40-1 bet. It felt pretty live. Annoying to get what would have been good movement on Austin Dillon. Annoying week overall. Glad we got the McDowell top 10 at least to get that, but annoying week. We have an off week in NASCAR this week and then on to National after that, but Formula One in Montreal. So we'll talk about that on the show later on this week. That's all we got here for today on this show, though. Want to give a big thank you once again to Austin Swaim for swinging by. Find him on Twitter at Swaim3. Find his work over at numberFire.com. I am on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JimSannes. Do not forget to subscribe to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. Also, check us out over on the FanDuel YouTube page. If you like what you hear, leave us a thumbs up on YouTube or a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. Hopefully, we get some more basketball and more hockey to talk about tomorrow. We are back to talk about the U.S. Open with Brandon Gdula. Have fun tonight. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow. This has been Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.